Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. Live on the phone with me today, I have Laurence Bradford in New York City. Laurence is a self-taught techie. She's the founder of Learn to Code with Me, and she's also a contributor to Forbes. Her specialties include technical content creation, online education, and front-end web development. Laurence, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Angela.
Well, it's great to finally connect. We've actually been communicating online for, I think, a few months now, so it's really nice to meet in person.
Yes, definitely. And thanks so much for having me on your show.
Yeah, so I'm really curious about your background. I think it's incredibly applicable to our listeners. Many of them, are techies, are interested to become techies. And the first thing I learned about you is that your undergraduate degree is actually in history and economics. And I'm really interested to learn how you decided to go from sort of this humanities or history and economics path, I should say, over to sort of a technology path. Like, what inspired you?
Yeah, so I'll try to give the condensed story because it's definitely, it could be very long and winding and lots of twists and turns. But when I was a junior in college, I studied abroad in China. And after that, I just always had this fascination with East Asia and then Southeast Asia. So after college, pretty much immediately, I decided to go to Thailand to teach English. And my end goal from going to teach English was to hopefully get a job in economic development. And I ended up doing that. I was teaching for 6 months. I was applying to different opportunities in Thailand and other countries in Southeast Asia. I ended up landing a lower level position at a Thai think tank in their economic development department. So I get there, and I thought I was where I wanted to be. I was really excited for this, and it's kind of like the next step in my career. And within the first month, I realized it was not what I thought it was at all. It was not what I thought it was going to be. I thought it would be exciting. It was kind of very slow and quite boring, to be honest. So I was a little bit lost at that time. I was like, what do I do now? This is what I want to do these past few years, and it's not what I thought it was. So what do I do now? So of course I turned to the internet, start doing research. One thing kind of led to another. And I was reading a bunch of articles about the demand for people with technology skills, the lack of women in technical roles. And I also had started my own travel blog at the time, so I was already using WordPress. And the stars aligned, you could say. So I began teaching myself how to build websites. I moved back to the U.S. within a few months, began taking different kinds of courses online and in person here. And lots happened between now and then, but now here I am about 3 years later.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, I think that's really special. And I think, you kind of alluded to it, but, my understanding is that you have not gone back to get another degree in, say, technology or computer programming, and you've actually taught yourself. It sounds like you started before you came back to the U.S. and then you've continued it. And I think it's really special and interesting, but I'm just wondering if you would share with us, why did you choose not to go back and get another degree?
Yeah, when I was back when I was living in Thailand, while I was teaching, aside from applying to jobs in economic development, I was also studying for the GRE, which maybe some listeners aren't familiar, but it is an exam to go to grad school. And I was also researching different programs. At that time, of course, it was for economic development. It wasn't for anything technology related. And I, once I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do, economic development, I was very just turned off to the idea of going back to school, at least until I had a very firm grasp of what I wanted to do. I never say never. Who knows? Maybe in a few years I'll go back. I found so many other alternative options to learning how to build websites, how to code, how to do other things in technology, that it really was never a big consideration for me to go back and get another degree.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really great. I actually talk to job seekers every day who want to make a transition from one industry to another. And often, they'll ask me, should I go back to college or should I go back to grad school? And, although that makes sense in certain industries, I think there are other industries where, you don't necessarily have to do that. And you're a really great example of someone who has found a way around it. How did you make that decision about, whether or not to go back and get another degree?
Yes, I'm nodding. Yes, of course. And that was another realization I had when I finally had this little opportunity in Thailand in economic development. It wasn't what I wanted. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I almost just spent, who knows how much money I would have spent, right, going back to school. Say if I didn't have that experience, I would have gone and studied economic development, dished out, $100,000, maybe who knows, maybe more, to go back to school. And then I would be, have debt then to pay off. So that was something I was also trying to avoid, dishing out that kind of money. And as you mentioned, time, it could take like 2 years, which is so much, especially when you're in your 20s, as I was, or still am at this time, out of your career. So I kind of put those pieces together, thank goodness.
Yeah, and it seems like that's kind of the whole point behind your website and your podcast, is to try to convince other people to, like it's named, learn to code with you.
Yes, definitely. Actually, as a theme for season 2 of the podcast, so I do in seasons, and they have themes, and right now I'm in season 2, and the theme of this one is called Self-Taught Coder Stories. So I'm actually only interviewing people who work in tech who don't have an academic degree in technology or computer science.
I noticed that you have a number of certifications, including Python and Ruby on Rails. And, I'm just wondering, from your perspective, why do you think certifications are valuable, and how did you decide what you wanted to learn about when you started pursuing these certifications?
Yeah, so just so the listeners know, because I know what you're referring to on my LinkedIn. So these are certifications from online courses that I completed, and I know one is from a program called 1 Month or 1 Month Rails, and then the Python would have been with Coursera, if I'm recalling correctly. I have quite a few. If you go to my LinkedIn, and then I definitely have a bunch from Linda. And I actually have some from Linda that are like for technology education or instructional design, which I ended up getting more interested in later. So I think certifications, especially from a reputable site, and the ones I mentioned, especially Coursera and Linda, I think they're great, and they can really add something to your LinkedIn. So I'll just give like the personal example. With the more recent ones I added in instructional design and stuff with technology education. I added those, I think, back in July, and that was because I was looking for roles in that area, so in ed tech and in like curriculum development. And I didn't have any quote-unquote like legitimate experience in either of those things. I taught myself. I had taken a bunch of online courses, and I had, different experience in other ways, but I had no academic experience. So what I did was I, kind of sought out courses that matched the jobs I was interested in, that I knew also offered certifications I could easily add to my LinkedIn. And lynda.com is owned by LinkedIn, which is now owned by Microsoft. So it's very easy to add Lynda certifications to your LinkedIn profile. It takes like 2 clicks of a button. So I knew that already, and I kind of was very strategic about those that I got most recently. Now, the Python and Ruby on Rails, I got those earlier on when I was still kind of dabbling in different things. So I ended up later not even actually pursuing either of those. Both Python is a language, and then Ruby on Rails is like a web app framework. I ended up not actually doing neither. However, I still think certifications could add value, and I keep them on my LinkedIn just because I think it shows that I have I'm curious in nature, and I like to learn new things, and I'm a self-starter, and I go out there, and I, am not afraid to teach myself.
Well, so we talked earlier about the cost of going back to get like another college degree. Not necessarily the certifications that you have taken, but just in general, do you get a sense, like, how much do these certifications cost to go through the course?
So for lynda.com, I think they change their pricing sometimes, but I would say it's between like $30 and $40 a month. So you could theoretically just, buckle down for 2 weeks, go through a bunch of courses, or let's just say a month, and go through a bunch of courses, get a bunch of certificates, and then just cancel your account and only spend maybe like $40 or something. And there are other coding programs where you get certificates that do cost significantly more, online and offline. There's something now, maybe some people are familiar with this, but coding boot camps, which are like 10-week or 12-week condensed programming intensive programs, and you can walk away from those with certificates as well. And those usually range anywhere from like $10,000 to $20,000.
Oh,
so
wow.
There's a lot of variety, and that's kind of a very different thing than taking a course, on Lynda or Coursera.
And when you take those courses on Lynda, do they quiz you at the end? Like, how does that part work?
Yeah, so Lynda has like thousands and thousands of courses, so they can vary a bit, but they, for the most part, have quizzes. The certificate with Lynda is really just when you complete all the lectures and the quizzes, yeah. And then there's so many. I have another one too, Coursera. Yes, with Coursera, it's on the university level, so it kind of depends on the university because it's an actual professor from a university.
Oh, wow.
And with that one, you actually did have to do like homework assignments.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so there's just so much variety with online learning. It's like you can, which is what makes it so amazing, because you can find something really tailored to like what you're looking for and the time you have, and yeah.
No, that's really interesting. So you talked a little bit about why you were a good fit for, kind of teaching yourself and exploring these things. If we're listening today, what are the attributes that you think make someone else like good at being a self-learner, specifically in technology?
Yeah, there's a lot of things, but I just think it's an eagerness to learn. And also, one of my favorite words to use with, I guess, learning anything, not just tech stuff, but grit. So, just hanging in there when the going gets tough, not giving up. And you definitely need like a certain level of mental toughness, I think, to do that. And learning how to program is not easy. It's definitely difficult. But even so, learning a little can get you a long way, I think. So, yeah, I would have to say I think those are the main things. Yeah, grit and just like an eagerness to learn.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do people ever ask you, technology and programming, it seems really hard. Is it hard? Like, do you get that feedback very much?
Yeah, I do. I have a lot of people say that they're not, I'm trying to like phrase it, like, I'm not good at technology, I'm not good at math, I'm not good at, these things that they kind of associate with learning how to program. But actually, especially with the math bit, like even if you weren't great at math in school, I mean, there are certain things with programming that definitely relate to math, but just because you did bad in like high school algebra or statistics doesn't mean you're not going to, you're doomed at learning how to code. Definitely not. And with like programming and web development, there's so many different aspects of it, and some I'd say are more creative, and then some are more, problem solving, so maybe a little bit more mathematical. So for instance, what comes to the top of my head with being more artsy, you could say, would be like web design, right? So that's more, aesthetic and design, and then of course there's the other stuff that is a little bit more mathematical.
No, I totally agree. And I have to disclose, I don't think I mentioned this to you ahead of time, but my undergrad is actually computer engineering. And so,
oh, okay.
But so I do know how hard it is to learn how to program at times, but you're right. It's all about grit. It's about interest, and there are different parts of technology that, use different types of skills. But I am a big, big fan of learning to do things on your own as opposed to paying for a new degree. So I think what you're doing is really interesting. But anyway, so Also, I mentioned in the introduction that you're a contributor to Forbes, which is super impressive. And you recently laid out 11 jobs that are in like high demand, high tech jobs. Or no, skills, I should say, excuse me. You had 11 in-demand tech skills that will make you more marketable on your resume. And I was just wondering, can you share with us what you think some of those tech skills are?
Yes. So, and these are all really like pretty simple. When I say simple, I mean like easy to learn. Like there's definitely free resources online, and it wouldn't take a really long time for someone to learn some of these things. So, definitely one is HTML, so hypertext markup language is what that is, and that's used in so many ways. I use it, in my job and on my blog regularly. So even just something like formatting an article on WordPress, HTML can come in handy. Which then leads me to actually WordPress, because WordPress is the most popular content management system in the world. Last I checked, I think like 22% of all websites use WordPress. In fact, the Forbes uses WordPress. I use WordPress for my own blog. And then the new company I work for now in New York, we are switching to WordPress soon for our blog. So, and I can name like so many other major sites that use WordPress. So knowing how to use that is definitely beneficial. And then let's see, a few others. Another one, SEO, so that's more marketing, search engine optimization. So ranking, like having content online rank in Google and other search engines. And there's like so many things that go into SEO. Some is not that technical, other stuff is technical, but either way, I think, especially in 2016, 2017, that's something a lot of companies care about is ranking in the search engine. So it's definitely a beneficial skill to add to your resume.
I totally agree. I think if you were to ask sort of, a chief marketing officer at a company, what is one of the biggest things on their mind that they're worried about, it's SEO.
Yeah, because it's one of those things you can't really like control, and you don't really know how it works. There's a lot of mystery because, Google, they don't reveal exact, and the algorithm's constantly changing, and it's definitely, it's exciting, but it's definitely something a lot of people care about.
I think SEO can be really very, very fun and rewarding. It can also be very stressful because your client or your boss is like, so when are you going to get me to number one? And you're like, I don't know. Because since, you can't pay for that ranking with Google. And so it's just a matter of, how well you figure out the algorithm at any given time and how well you're competing with other people in your space. So those are all really, really good suggestions. And you're right. They're things that are easy that you can kind of learn on your own and, would be very helpful. So also, in addition to just skills, I'm curious to know what you think about technology jobs in terms of which ones would be the easiest to teach yourself, before, without any kind of formal training.
Yeah, so I think, and again, this is just from my experience, there's so many jobs in tech. There's so many jobs in technology. There's ones I haven't even uncovered yet. And I used to be the tech careers expert at about.com, where I would write just about tech jobs. And I was there for I was doing that for over a year. And a great example is a job I actually have now, which the title is product educator. And it kind of combines like a few different jobs into one. So product management, user experience, technical content creation, it's all kind of jumbled. It's all these things that I love. So it's really enjoyable. So especially for people just starting out, I wouldn't worry. I think having an end goal in mind is very important. So knowing which jobs you're working towards, because then you can reverse engineer what it is you should learn. So having that kind of job description that even if you don't meet anything right now of the requirements, but working towards meeting those goals so you could one day get those jobs is a great blueprint to follow. But so getting back into the jobs that are easiest to master, I think it also so much depends on the person, like what they enjoy. But say if let's just say if an individual is creative and they love to draw and maybe even do like little logos and do some illustrations on the computer. I think a very natural fit would be something with web design or user experience design or user interface design. So that would be a little less of the harder programming skills and more, wireframing, the way a website or a mobile app may look. Maybe even designing icons, so using a tool like Sketch or Adobe Illustrator. And then some of these roles also do involve coding, so turning that kind of into life. So maybe like using HTML, CSS, JavaScript to sort of build these out on a website.
Mm-hmm.
And then, aside from that, let's see. So there are a few technical jobs that look for more academic backgrounds,
Mm-hmm.
and this is changing, but data science, for instance, a lot of people in data science have PhDs, but I'm seeing more data science boot camps pop up just because it's such an in-demand field.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that's changing. I think overall a lot of jobs it's less seen as a requirement to have a college degree. So I guess my main one, if you're a creative person, would be web design, and then if you're more of an analytical person, doing stuff not like hardcore data science, but like a data analyst, or like there's even specific roles just for like web data analysts. So you would be analyzing like the traffic, for instance, coming to a website,
Mm-hmm.
and that could use more of like the different kinds of data tools and things like Excel, and there's a bunch of like marketing kind of data tools out there to collect information from visitors and then, create insights based on that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that one's a really good example. The analytics piece in terms of analyzing the traffic on a website that you just mentioned. I know I'm located in Memphis, and for example, there was a time when I was actually hiring someone for a company to do web analytics, and there are like 5 people in Memphis that know how to do it.
Yeah, it's very niche.
Yeah, but it's like
a little more niche.
Right, but it's super easy to learn because the technology, Google Analytics, for example, is free, at least, a basic version of it. So kind of anybody could latch on to that. I ended up hiring someone from another state and, move them to Tennessee because I couldn't find anybody local, but that's an easy to learn skill. But I have to ask you, you mentioned your new role. Is it a little bit similar to being sort of like an evangelist, or is it similar or different?
Yeah, so so to be completely honest, we kind of like made up the title.
Sure.
Because so it kind of combines a bunch of the different things that I like and a bunch
Mm-hmm.
of the things at the company, like problems that needed to be solved.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed just like the title product educator was the best fit for that. So a few of the things that I do here, and side note, the company I work for, Teachable. So it is like software for people to create and sell online courses.
Mm-hmm.
I manage our external facing knowledge base. So what users use, to find answers and tutorials on how to use the software. I also help do things within the interface itself. So, for instance, I think there's a title like a UX copywriter.
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of fit and kind of match what I do. So I'll help, for instance, write descriptions and the menu items and descriptions within the interface. And for that, I work a lot with like the different engineers here. So say we're releasing a new feature or something new in the software, and I'll help come up with all the text and like even like the layout and stuff of that screen.
Oh, that's interesting.
Within the interface. Yeah, yes, that's another kind of aspect. I also manage our academy, which is like a educational, kind of like the knowledge base, but more so courses that relate to teaching online, and a few new things I'm going to be working on with that. And there's other things that I do here, but it all kind of revolves and ties back into educating our customers. But and beyond that, doing things more so internally. So like improving communication internally across the teams. That relates to the product.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. It sounds like part of what makes you good at your job isn't just the technology piece. It's that you are a good writer, a good communicator, and that you have a background in education, which I think is kind of what you're getting at in terms of, do something that you're good at that is related to what you're naturally good at.
Yes, you worded that. The way you said that was absolutely perfect. Yeah, I think it really combines a lot of my strengths, and it's a very niche role. Mm-hmm. But I think when sometimes you niche down, that the results are even better. Because, for instance, when I was applying to jobs, I only applied to 3. This is back in April.
Okay.
Very specific jobs. All were very similar to the job I have now, and I did a lot of research up front. I applied to 3, and I ended up getting interviews at all 3 within like 24 hours or something insane. Wow. It was like, it's like an insane ratio. But the thing was, I did so much research, and the background that I had at that point was so catered and tailored to these jobs, mm-hmm. because they all combined, writing, technical content creation, education, and technology in some way.
Mm-hmm. I think it's such a good example of, being able to sort of rework your transferable skills, to have them work in another industry, again, without going back to school. I really think it's such a good strategy. So help us to understand, like, if we have no technology work experience, like we've never been paid to work as a technologist before, how can we get a company to take us seriously? Like, what did you do that, allowed those 3 companies to want to bring you in and talk to you?
Yeah, oh man. So when I first began learning, I thought I wanted a full-time job as a web developer, or specifically then a front-end web developer. So mm-hmm. more so on the creative side, but still using JavaScript and very code heavy. Within a few months, I realized that I didn't want to write code all day. I love to write. I love to create content. I love to do a bunch of different things. And so then I was kind of even just put off the idea of having a full-time job. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, during that, it was about 2 years or something, I was doing a lot of freelance work. I was doing consulting. I started my own blog. I started my own podcast, which both are monetized. And I'm still actually making money. I still make money from both, even though I have my full-time job now, which is really, really nice. Mm-hmm. And I was doing things like writing on About.com and Forbes, which are also, these are all little revenue streams coming in. But I guess kind of inadvertently, I knew what I was doing. I was trying to get ahead of my career. At that time, it was more so starting my own business. But as it turns out, all these things I had been doing actually looked really great when it came to getting a full-time job. Of mm-hmm. course, one downside was I didn't have any real full-time work experience, but fortunately, the places I was interviewing at, that wasn't a problem at all. Maybe at some companies it would be, but the 3 places that I ended up interviewing at, that was not a concern of anyone, the fact that I didn't have any previous full-time experience.
So why do you think that is? I mean, were they smaller companies, or what made them different in that way?
So the company I work for now is small. It is a startup, and mm-hmm. a lot of people here, this is kind of their first quote unquote real job, because either they were entrepreneurs, or they're more recent out of college, or they are kind of like me in one way or another. But the other 2 companies, no. I mean, they weren't. One was about 200 or so people, and then the other a few thousand people. So I just think that my experience in other ways, and my interest in my passion and my skills just kind of outweighed that if it would have been a concern. But I don't really think it was for either. I know for one, the one concern was I didn't have any formal instructional design experience. So actually, that does kind of relate. But that's why I went and got those certifications, because they recommended that I did that. So I went out and kind of got them in just a few days.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, so what about networking? Do you focus very much on sort of connecting with other people and growing your technology network, or has that not been an issue?
Oh, yes, definitely. So I guess the way I sort of go about it, I'm not really into going to networking events and things like that. I mean, they're just not my cup of tea. I do sometimes. I definitely think if you're the kind of person who enjoys them, they could be super, super valuable. I'm more of let's meet and get coffee, after I've connected with someone online, so it's a more intimate setting. But early on, because of my blog and because of my podcast, I was always reaching out to people, trying to get people on my podcast, people, I never spoke to before. And to me, that's networking because, you're getting them on your show, you're having a conversation with them, you're building a connection. Likewise, with my blog, I would always try to guest post on different sites. And through that, I would, befriend site owners and editors. And I've always been very active, more so online and through email, though, or Twitter.
Yeah, I think, I find networking within the technology world to be kind of a unique animal in a way. I've gone to a lot of these like hackathons and appathons and, all different kinds of technology meetups. And I feel like technology people, they're always sort of looking to continuously grow their skills in a way that I don't see in other industries. So if you want to stay in technology, you have to be learning all the time.
Yes, definitely. That's definitely true.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me wonder, too, if that's part of the reason that you could sort of take certifications and jump in midstream is there's always new technology that you could be on the front of.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, because nobody has been doing anything for, 20 years. I mean, it's outdated at that point,
Yeah, even I feel like 10 years even is, there's people who've been doing programming for 10 years, but what they're doing today is so remarkably different from whatever they would have been doing even 2 years ago. My boyfriend is a software engineer, and my dad's actually worked in tech my whole life, which is funny because I never was interested in technology until after college, but my dad has always been in technology. But I know just from, especially seeing my dad, he's always been learning new things and is always being thrown, new projects. He doesn't really know what's going. He has to sort of figure it out. And kind of, definitely it's an industry where you have to teach yourself to survive.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good way to say it, actually. And thinking back, even the friends that I went to college with who also did computer engineering, they're not programming in any of the languages we learned in school.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. For instance, my boyfriend, he's a computer science degree, and a lot of the languages that he was learning in school, he doesn't even use, or at least his job today, a few years after college, he's not using them. He's using something completely different. Now, that's not to say that having that foundation didn't help him. It definitely does, because once you learn one language, it's easier to learn another. But the point is, it's so rapidly changing. So I think it's such a great industry for someone to come in as a self-learner.
Oh, I totally agree. And I do agree, having that degree is helpful because it teaches you how to learn programming languages.
Yes, definitely.
But I think one of the first ones I learned was Fortran. And not only was it Fortran, it was Fortran 77, which was on its way out even then. And I don't think anyone has, used that in years and years and years. So, yeah, it's definitely an interesting and constantly changing industry. And it's so interesting that you're covering this as a sole topic sort of on your website and your podcast. I'm really impressed with that. So if listeners are listening today and they'd like to learn more about you and they'd like to see how they could learn to code with you, where should they go?
Yeah, so my website is learntocodewith.me. And I'm sure you'll put that somewhere in the show notes or something.
Yeah.
And then you can also find me on Twitter, and my handle is slightly different. It's Learn Code With Me, because on Twitter you can only have, 15 characters, and the name was a little too long. But anyway, so it's at Learn Code With Me on Twitter. And as you mentioned, I write frequently on Forbes. I publish about 5 articles a month, so I'm always putting new content on there. And if you go to learntocodewithme.com/Forbes, that'll redirect you to my site on Forbes, and you can see all my writing there.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks everyone for listening, and thanks to those who sent me questions. You can send me your questions to angela@copelandcoaching.com. You can also send me questions via Twitter. I'm at Copeland Coach, and on Facebook, I'm Copeland Coaching. Don't forget to help me out. Subscribe on iTunes and leave me a review.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.